When it comes to roguelike design and replayability, it's often considered that procedural generation or proc gen is this magical solution that by just putting into your game, it'll magically make it more replayable and people will keep coming back to it, and of course, the concept of endless replayability. But for today's critical thought, we're going to discuss more about what creates variance and why games that often do very much of it tend to fail, and why some of the best examples of replayability come from roguelikes or action roguelikes that are very small when it comes to proc gen. Replayability is a major concept or a major part of any roguelike, roguelite, or rogue adjacent game that you can think of. And the use of procedural generation and random generation have been major elements about what makes these games be so replayable. But there's a difference between replayability and creating variance. And this was a major point that I talk about in Game Design Deep Dive Roguelikes, that variance is the number of legitimately different ways there are to play a roguelike, and again, we'll call them roguelikes just to make it easier for me for this video. But when we talk about proc gen and this idea of creating content, it's easy to kind of compartmentalize this into categories. Each category can be filled with as many listings as you want. And when you are building something with procedural generation, a very huge misconception is that the procedural generation is creating something from nothing, that the game is writing its own code, that it's, creating its own systems and mechanics. Somewhere a roguelike designer is crying unexplainably after I just said that. But when we look at how proc gen works and how replayability and variance are generated, just having content generation in of itself does not create replayability. And this is something that I think a lot of developers, especially those that are kind of like first timers, experiencing or working with proc gen or random generation, tend to fail. So one of the examples that I like to use, and something I brought up in my book, is this idea again of categories of content. So here is a pop quiz for everyone. Let's say I have a game that has three groups of content, or we're creating weapons: one-hand melee, two-hand melee, two-hand range. Within each one of those groups, I'm going to have 100 listings of weapons. Sword, small sword, dagger, crossbow, longbow, however you want to describe it. So if I have three categories and 100 listings per each, how many unique and different weapons do I have in my game? So I'm sure some of you right now have probably guessed 300, and if you did, you are wrong. The answer is 3. Because, as I said, procedural generation does not create something from nothing. It is all built on the foundation and the archetype or the architecture that you as a developer define with your algorithm. This is why when you look at ARPGs, that when you swing a sword or you swing a dagger, if they're all part of the same kind of equipment class or content category, it's the same kind of swing. So they're going to swing a sword, they're going to swing a dagger, they're going to swing a mace. It's all same because it's using the same animation. So what this means is that when it comes to content generation, the kind of the breadth versus depth argument when it comes to these games, that you can fill 3 groups of content with 500, 10,000, a million listings, but if they're all built on the same foundation, you're not really changing anything. And this is why we see from a lot of games that tend to go for kind of mixing or shuffling elements around without adding in new stuff, they start to feel very samey. The footage that you're seeing up there is from Phantom Abyss. This is the kind of Spelunky meets Mirror's Edge game that just came out. And within like 30 minutes of playing this game, we were already seeing repeated elements. And this is the thing you have to worry about when you're trying to create replayability and variance. That having traps or having these kinds of fixed events in your game, the fixed event is going to basically be done the same way every time. So that it doesn't matter how much you shuffle the environment around or move rooms around. The same spike trap you see there, it has the same solution no matter where or when it shows up. It's very similar to what we see in kind of action-heavy games like Dead Cells. That yes, each time I play the game, the world is going to be randomly generated. But I still have all my movement tech and my ways of getting around. So if on one run I go left, up, right, down, and on another run I go right, right, left, down, it's not changing what I'm doing. So when you want to create variance in terms of content categories, you want to look at adding breadth to your game and not depth. So with the example I just said, with one-hand melee, two-hand melee, two-hand range, if let's say in an expansion or with DLC I throw in one-handed range, suddenly I have far more options. I have something that feels different to play. And for many developers, they may delineate things down extremely well. And they'll go, one-handed slashing, one-handed piercing, one-handed brunt attacks, one-handed slashing, one-handed slashing piercing, piercing slashing, and we just keep going down that line. But again, remember, for each category you add in, it's creating another foundation that you need to properly fill out. Because if you don't, then things just start to become that same thing over and over again. And this is often one of the issues that we see from open world survival games, when it comes to not having enough that impacts each play. When we look at the popular examples of the genre, Don't Starve, 7 Days to Die, Ark, even going older with titles like Minecraft, the problem that these games have, it goes back to what I just said a few minutes ago about what the player is doing versus how the world is kind of changing or forcing different elements. You see, open world design is often built on the idea of biomes. Each biome is its own encapsulated area with, specific environmental details, enemies, events, items, resources, and so on. So when the world is procedurally generated around, each biome is not going to be completely different each time you play it. The fire biome on your 5th run is going to be the same situation on your 30th run. And what we see in open world or these kinds of survival games is that progression is built on a fixed set of items that you need. When you play Minecraft, you don't immediately go for diamond and gold, whatever rated items. You start by punching a tree. The tree gives you wood. You get the wood, you turn it into a pickaxe. You start mining stone. You get stone to make stone tools. The stone tools that you mine, I think, copper or iron next. And you rinse and repeat as you go down the line. Nothing that's going to change that is going to occur no matter if you're on your 100th run or your 1,000,000th run of Minecraft. And this is one of the issues I have with Don't Starve. That despite, everything that goes on in that world, I'm still doing the same tasks. I need the same things every time I play it. There is no adaptability. There is no variance that we can truly see in open world survival games. So it doesn't matter if the world is procedurally generated, because I'm still doing steps 1 through 8 on my checklist. And what we often see in games like this is that the biomes are going to be placed in a kind of a logical way around the player. So that if I spawn here, you're not going to put the fiery pit of death right on top of where my character spawns. That's going to be maybe 3 or 4 biomes out. the point about all this is that if you want your game to have replayability, if you want to generate variance, that you need to be able to present to the player legitimately different tactics and different ways of playing it. So that on my 5th run, it's going to be different than my 10th run or my 100th run, and so on and so forth. So, with all that said, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to look into why some of these games do this better than other ones. And here's a bit of a pop quiz question for you, or another one. As I said, open world games tend to fail when it comes to providing variance on each play. So, what aspect is randomized or procedurally generated that works in smaller games like Hades, Binding of Isaac, let's see, what are a few other ones that we've played, Enter the Gungeon, and so on, that makes them feel so replayable in each run, despite not going as over the top as games like Don't Starve, Minecraft, and other open world games? And while you're trying to figure that out, if you're interested in more about roguelike design and my other books, then you can check out what my current offerings are. For entry-level students, we have 20 essential games to study, and then the Game Design Deep Dive series that takes an extensive look at different genres, with horror coming by the end of 2021. In the last part, I spoke about what does it mean to generate variance through play, and why plenty of action RPG or action roguelike games are better at creating varied runs as opposed to titles that do far more in terms of proc gen. And I pose a little question for you. And the answer is that games like Hades, Enter the Gungeon, Binding of Isaac, and so on, the variance is focused explicitly on what the player can do on each individual run. And that is the key to having a lot of variance in your game. As I said, introducing more enemy types or more options in each content category, it's not changing those categories. Giving me 27 varieties of rat monster doesn't change the fact that I'm still fighting rat monsters. So with Hades here, a lot of what I get in each run is going to be completely RNG. I pick what my starting weapon's going to be, but everything else is completely up for grabs. So like right here where I'm getting a boon from Aphrodite, not only is where she shows up going to be different on each run, but whatever boon she's going to give me when she does. And a lot of what makes these games work so well is the idea of making lemons, or making lemonade out of lemons. That you have to adapt to what's going on. You cannot just use the same strategy again and again, because A, you can't guarantee you're going to get that, and B, just because it worked one time doesn't mean it's going to work on whatever the game throws at you the next time. And this is why people can spend hundreds of hours doing runs of Hades or Binding of Isaac or Enter the Gungeon and have legitimately different experiences. This is very much an offshoot of deck-building roguelikes. So with a deck-building roguelike like Monster Train here, when I choose my starting faction, that determines the pool of rewards I get after each battle. But the cards that I'm getting here, that is my build. And whatever I choose, and then the plans going forward, that's affecting my strategy. Not only that, but that's compounded by the artifacts or relics you see in the top left. So that each time I complete a run, or each time I play a run, I am getting a legitimately different strategy. And the chance that I'm going to get the exact same cards and the exact same relics in the exact same order, that is so small we can't even really calculate it. But herein lies the genius of this kind of randomization that is focused on the player's strategy. More importantly, the player gets to choose what they take out of this. This isn't the game just saying, you win, here's a card. The game is saying, you win, choose what you want out of this selection. Now, it's not completely up to the player, obviously, because the selection is randomized. It's chosen 3 random cards from whatever that pack may be. But it gives you a greater chance of control and it allows you to start to formulate a plan. Because the point about good roguelike design or good variance is that it's almost like, the island of misfit toys, that it all has to come together to work. There should not be one grand strategy that you need to shoot for every time. Because if win or lose is based off of if I don't get X, Y, and C, then I lose immediately. This was one of the issues that I had with a game like FTL. That FTL features the Rebel flagship at the end of a run. That flagship is hard-coded. It has 3 distinct phases, 3 distinct strategies it's going to use against you. If you don't get the answer to each one of those strategies, you're not going to win. And it was one of the things that kind of turned me off of playing FTL a lot. Now with Monster Train, and to a lesser extent Slay the Spire, the bosses that I run into are different. I know at the start of a run of Monster Train who the final boss is going to be, but I don't know what my strategy is going to be until I start collecting cards for it. But it is something I need to prepare for. Whereas with Slay the Spire, it's basically, here, prepare your deck. Oop, your deck is wrong for this boss, you're going to lose. And that can be very frustrating for a lot of people. And this is what makes creating variants so difficult. The builds and strategies and options, they have to be good enough to work, but they can't be so game-breaking that literally getting one card or one weapon and the entire run is over. Conversely, it can't be so limited that if I don't take all of these options, I just immediately lose. It doesn't matter how great I'm at the game, it doesn't matter if my build is superior, it's just not superior enough. And this is the problem that I have with Spelunky and Spelunky 2, and why I said Spelunky 2 was a good game but a bad roguelike. That the variance or the procedural generation of a run, it's not tied to the player. It's tied to the environment. It is a very advanced system, there's no denying that. But it's a similar case of what we see in Dead Cells. That changing the environment, but not changing what the player is going to do in said environment, means that my strategy for play is fixed every time. When I'm in a situation like with Spelunky 2 here, I just got poisoned, I know what I need to do. I know what the strategy is that the game is going to throw at me. Yes, where something shows up on the run is going to be entirely up to the RNG. But I know at the end of the day that to give me the greatest chance at winning, I need to do A, B, C, D, E, and F. Nothing else matters. And what makes this very frustrating from a replayability standpoint is that I know very quickly in a Spelunky 2 run whether or not this run is going to be a serious contender. Now again, you can have outliers. You can have a run that starts off completely horribly, you know you have no chance in hell of winning, and you get a win at the 11th hour. But for a lot of games, or for a lot of lesser roguelike experiences, it doesn't work that way. And people don't want to play a game where they're going to lose 90% of the time, and then, that magical 10% at the end gives them the chance at winning. They want to feel that every run has a legitimate chance at winning. And to do that, you need to give the player a variety of options, so that if item A doesn't show up in a run, maybe item B will be my saving grace. With Spelunky 2, again, everything about how you play this game is kind of preordained. I know what weapons I'm going to get, I know what items I'm going to need. But if they don't show up, or the game just gets me very unlucky with them, what can I do? If I don't get a cape, if I don't get any kind of air tech, how am I supposed to do a lot of the advanced sections? If I don't get, some kind of healing, if I try to get to the Cosmic Ocean or get some of these later areas, I can just be chipped away. And what ends up happening in a lot of games that have this issue is that the run becomes so focused on getting that one perfect play that nothing else really matters. So when you do get that perfect run, it feels amazing. But then if you die or you squander it, and now you have to replay the whole thing, hopefully, and get it back again, it is just going to kill your interest in it. And this was one of the things that I liked about, again, Enter the Gungeon, Hades, that I don't need perfection to win. I can make do with a bad build. I can be godly with an amazing build. But at the end of the day, if I don't learn these games, I'm going to lose regardless. Whereas with Spelunky here, yes, skill is a huge factor in whether or not you're going to win or lose. But it's more important, if you're going for like the true ending and all the craziness, that the stars have to kind of align for you. Because no matter how good I am, I can't immediately get to Hundun without doing the other things that involve in this game. If I don't get the tablet, if I don't get, that creature that lets me fly, well, I'm in kind of big trouble and the run's over. Now, you can argue, of course, that if you don't get that stuff, you can still get a normal win. And I've had Binding of Isaac runs where I just decided to go for like a lesser win instead of going all the way to the end. But that is up to the player's discretion, not because the game just says, oh, this item got destroyed, your run is over. So to begin to wrap up this video, true variance is about giving the player legitimately different options. It does not matter if the world is procedurally generated every time, if the player still must do the same exact things again and again. And this is why, if you are interested in making a roguelike, or making a game that is supposed to be very replayable, look at action roguelikes. Look at even the traditional or classic style roguelikes that give you all manner of crazy weapons and possible combinations and things that can just mess with your run. Because at the end of the day, in order for there to be variance, the game should not be predictable. I should not know the second I start playing a game what I need to win. I shouldn't have my win condition figured out within 20 seconds of play, or that I know that I must get these specific items. And when games can keep the player guessing, it leads to far more entertaining content, and leads to these games lasting longer, as with the Binding of Isaac, where people have had over like 1,000 hours of runs in that game. I'm sure that's even on the short side for some of the super fans. So for those of you watching, can you think of roguelikes, or better yet, can you think of games that aren't considered roguelikes, that have done an amazing job of being replayable, that give a high sense of variance from play to play, and that it just makes you want to keep playing these games over and over again? Let me know in the comments below. As always, check out our Discord and Patreon link down below. And come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where is in the art and science of games. Until next time, take care.